Good afternoon, Facebook. This is Tommy Valentine, Executive Director of Historic Athens. We want to thank you so much for tuning in today for our 1 o'clock episode of This Moment in History, COVID-19 in Athens, Georgia. Today's broadcast, just like all of our broadcasts this week, are being brought to you by Bertus and Catherine Downs. So we really appreciate the Downs family for their support of what is the 11th and final week of this series. We first began this series back in April. We had an inkling that it would be important to document and explore this unique moment in history. And over the last 50 plus conversations, that's exactly what we've done. We've talked to elected officials, entrepreneurs, musicians, artists, every type of leader, clergy that we've been able to gain access to help explain and record this moment through oral history. Today's broadcast, if it's your first, includes some features that we want you to know about. This is not just a video for you to sit at home and watch. This is also a video that you can guide. These conversations, all 55 of them, are going to be contributed to local libraries and research institutions. And so through your assistance in the comments section, we can help ensure it's an accurate depiction of not just Mayor Ferrelle today, but also his relationship to the community and any questions you may have. So if you have a question, if you have a comment, if you have a word of encouragement, go ahead and comment right below the video, and we can bring it on screen and make it part of today's dialogue. One other note here, which is if you are interested in historic Athens, you want to find out more, maybe you want to go back and see some of those previous videos, we're going to talk about how you can get plugged into our organization, into our nonprofit, about halfway through today's program. For now, however, let's go ahead and get the conversation started. I mentioned that we had talked to several types of people in the past. We had talked to entrepreneurs, we had talked to musicians, we had talked to elected officials. There's the train going by for our regular viewers. That's a cameo. I sometimes feel like Mr. Rogers with his trolley. But as I said, we've talked to entrepreneurs, we've talked to musicians, we've talked to elected officials. Today, we're going to be at the center of that Venn diagram. We're going to talk to somebody who's lived in all those different worlds and see how COVID-19 has affected the work he does. So we'll go ahead and make some switches here, and we'll get Mayor Dodd Ferrelle on the program. One moment. All right, very good. All right, Mr. Mayor, how are you?
I'm great. Tommy, how are you?
I'm doing very well. What did we say before we went on air? That we're realizing the correct answer to that might just be, I don't know these days, it's hard.
Yeah.
We all want to give the brave answer, right? We're doing great.
But it's great to see.
Mayor, I want to get started by.
No, go ahead.
No, you're right. It is great to see each other. That part is true. So, Mayor, I want to take a moment here and make sure that our viewers are very familiar with you. Historic Athens, the Athens area, obviously Athens Clarke County includes Winterville. And so any attempt to record this moment in history that failed to take the Winterville perspective into account would have been an incomplete document. And so we really appreciate you coming here to talk to us. Can you take a moment just to introduce yourself, introduce Winterville, and introduce your relationship to the community?
Sure. And thanks for including Winterville in this. What is it? Important work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Especially for as we move into the future and as we look back on this time. This will prove to be very informative, I'm sure, from all the different perspectives that you've gathered. And again, appreciate you coming to Winterville. So my name is Dodd Ferrelle. I'm the mayor of Winterville. I'm currently in my second term, first year of my second term. And every year has been different. And this is certainly no different. This year has been challenging, and every day I tell people that I almost feel like a pilgrim in a new world. Just today there was just sideswiped by something out of the blue. But Winterville is holding steady. Winterville is a historic little train town. We are on the edge of the county out here between, sandwiched in between Oglethorpe County, Madison, and Clark County, and we're completely inside Athens, Clark County. We're only city within the county. We have been changing, and we have been going through a lot of real big changes, major changes here recently during this pandemic, where when people come back out to see the city after the fog lifts, they're going to see a different Winterville with the amenities that we've added, the Firefly Trail, and a lot of the work that we've been doing in our Public Works Department. But so we're a historical little train town, and thanks for the train riding by. I'm in the depot right now, so the train riding by was, I felt right at home.
There we go.
So a lot of times older citizens feel like they hear trains when they come in the depot. So I wasn't sure whether I was hearing a ghost. we do have them out here because I am sitting in this beautiful building in the depot right outside the old train tracks. But my relationship to this community is one of enduring love, and also I am humbled to be the public servant for every citizen in this county and beyond every day, but certainly during this time. It is a humbling time to be a public servant because you are humbled every day in this position during this time for sure. But my relationship with this community is one of love, and one of hoping to bring diversity, inclusivity, and all that to the forefront during these times as well, and really, really strengthening an already strong community that is Winterville.
Mm-hmm. You know, Dodd, before we went on air, I talked about how when you and I first met each other, before I even had this job, some of our first discussions, it's ironic in hindsight because they were about historic preservation. You know, Winterville has won a series of preservation awards over the last few years. I think ultimately at some point we're just going to have to give you an award for general rehabilitation of the entire city. You know, I think everything from the public art projects, the train depot has been renovated, the theater is being renovated, and it seems like and you know, I'll mention in advance about Winterville. It's a real interesting point to me. I lived in Winterville for a while, not far from the train depot. I used to live on Smoky Road, and back then, Winterville was very sleepy, which was part of the appeal, but it certainly wasn't on the tip of people's tongues. At the conclusion of today's interview, just like every interview, I'm going to ask you a question about, you know, how you'd spend a day, your first day post-COVID, you know, where you'd go. And I just want to tell you, it's not uncommon for our guests, the first words out of their mouth is to talk about the Little City Diner out there. And so, I mean, it does seem like Winterville is going through some really exciting changes. How does it feel to be at the center of that storm?
It feels good. We have a lot of new citizens moving into the city all the time. I meet them on the streets. I jog a mile around the city square every morning, Monday through Friday, just to kind of reset and clear my head. And I run into new citizens a lot, and that are moving here because of some of the things that are going on here. A lot of artists have moved into town, you know, and some of the things that are going on around us that are causing people to look for other places to live. Winterville's lucky enough to capture a lot of those people and a lot of the artists and creative people that are coming out here. So, and with all the incredible history and all the buildings that we have here, that I wanted to make sure we protected, because as you know, we created the Historic Preservation Commission a few years ago.
Right.
Because I was, you know, through the years, you look back at these books that we have and these buildings, these beautiful buildings that were right off the town square that are not here anymore, and some of the current buildings that we had years ago that were dilapidated and you know, facing ruin, that are now being renovated, which is really exciting to be in the middle.
Right.
And you know, we're to say we're in the middle of it, I think we're at the very beginning of it. Like
Mm.
Winterville is just starting to be on the tip of people's tongues, and with some of the amenities that we have, that strengthened the community will be able to thrive, because what we're putting in place are a rails to trail system where we get the community out. I'm seeing people, the trail's not even finished yet, and there are people that I have not seen walking around the city since I've lived here, that are out on the trail and walking with their families, social
Right.
distance, but walking with their families. So how great is that? Gosh, just to be able to be a part of it, and to much less be in the middle of it, but to just be a part of it with these community members, because Wintervillians are very proud, and when I have community workday events, we have a lot of people show up because they
Right.
want to be a part of what we're building. So just to be a small part of it is fantastic.
So I want to go back into your background just a bit more. So, especially because I think that so many of the other areas we're going to explore on COVID-19 will rely on our audience having a pretty solid understanding of who you are. So, can you talk a little bit about the experiences that you had in your life that you now bring into this job?
Absolutely. Being a musician, and kind of putting yourself out there, when you're a public servant, you're 24/7. I tell people, even your family, when one serves, you all serve.
Mhm.
So as a musician, I think it gave me that thick skin that you need to
Mhm.
be in public service. And also, that kind of that do-it-yourself work ethic that I've always had has kind of helped me to get a lot of these things going and off the ground. And, just getting people to walk into the auditorium when it was full of dirt and old furniture and just had become a warehouse, kind of getting people to understand and appreciate a new idea and to kind of be a part of that. So being a musician my whole life and being in bands and that whole dynamic of working with people and putting on live performances and hosting town halls, it all just kind of seemed like a perfect transition.
Right.
I won't say it got me entirely ready for public service,
Right.
but it was. I think it was a great lead in to do that. And I've always wanted to help people, and I've always thought about that in my songwriting too. So a lot of the components of what I was before and still am have bled over into my public service for sure. I
Now,
hope that, I hope that answers the question.
no, it does. In my admittedly much smaller role as a nonprofit executive director, one of the things I recognize is when you have a job that is any kind of executive role like yours does, you have to reach into your toolkit and figure out which tools you brought with you and use them all. One of the experiences that I ultimately didn't stick with, but that it was so important, was my time in the private sector, in management. That's something you also bring to the table, that you have your own background as an entrepreneurial spirit. How does that experience kind of bleed over into your day-to-day work as mayor?
I think that brings the community aspect into it, and dealing
Mhm.
with all the various aspects of the business community, not only in Athens, but also in the surrounding counties,
Mhm.
and kind of and spending time out in the field, so to speak,
Yep.
so that it further informs you, because if you stay in one place, you're just informed by what you're surrounded
Right.
by. But if you leave and you understand what's going on a little further out, you can incorporate some of that, and be informed by some of those better practices or best practices or worst practices,
Yeah.
whatever those are. So that community, that greater community, that
Yeah.
I always talk about Winterville as being a part uh, of that greater community that is Athens, and really beyond. We're so fortunate to be in this unique part of the state that is Athens and the surrounding rural areas,
Yeah.
that I'm sure we'll talk about later. But I guess, that community aspect is kind of brings that piece into it.
Sure. You mentioned earlier in the interview about all of the excellent rehabilitation, adaptive reuse, restoration that's going out in your community. Historic Athens had the opportunity last year to have two really fun overlaps with you, Mayor. One was uh, the Mayor's show, which I hope we can find a way to replicate some version of this year, but for Porch Fest. But the you playing the Kelly Gertz's Porch for Historic Athens Porch Fest. That was a really perfect ending to a very memorable day. The other overlap was from our first ever Athens Place in Peril list, where your local HPC submitted a project to preserve a important local African American site, a cemetery, and your city worked quicker than a lot of municipalities, where you designed a new sign, you got it up, you clarified the ownership issue. So whether it's your work, your ongoing work to preserve your community, whether it's the fact that you were willing to come out and support Porch Fest, whether it's the speed and effectiveness that you applied to the place in peril, clearly history and preservation is something that is very near and dear to you. Where did that come from? Where does that passion for history and preservation come from?
Well, I can zero right in on the fact that I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, and from the history of the city, not only in the structures, but the forts there and the history since 1733. Mm-hmm. It informed my songwriting. I brought that symbolism and a lot of the landscapes into my music, but I also it's near and dear to my heart, historic preservation, because of how beautiful and just the feeling that you get in cities like Savannah, and just spending my early years there and my growing up there really drove that home to me. And the St. Paul's Episcopal Church that I attended, I don't think I ever had a choice. I think I think I was just raised to know that historic preservation was just something you do. It's just something you have to do, and especially to keep your city strong, but to preserve these beautiful old buildings that were, built so incredibly beautifully well,
Right.
So I don't think I ever had a choice, Tommy. I think it was just
Yeah, no, Savannah's certainly ground zero for this. Certainly you were infected pretty early. So we've talked about past development and preservation. I want to switch gears here as we transition into talking about COVID by setting the scene for you with some new development. Okay, so I remember way back in the now forgotten era of February, seeing this post. I'm just going to share it with the audience because it's one that you kind of touched on. So this was back February 28th. You were celebrating the first concrete being poured. The Firefly Trail is real. I know that, when I think back to that time of period, it was really happening. I'm out running all the time, so I can, now that I'm over by the Quick Trip where the connector's going in, you can really see it. And this has been the dream for a really long time. When I've considered living in Winterville before, the idea that the Firefly would enable it to make it so that I could live in a city where I could still see the stars at night, but I could be a 15-minute bike ride from downtown Athens. That's incredibly powerful. And so it's so crazy to think that only about 15 days after that post I just shared, we were suddenly having to talk about shelter in place. And I just think about the way that it just kind of slammed into us. I'm sure it slammed into you. You've had to make your own sets of choices and negotiate with different stakeholders around the state. So why don't we start there? Take me from late February to now. What has that timeline looked like for you? How did it unfold in your life?
So the picture you posted was obviously a very happy day, right? The equipment was down, the pavement, first piece of pavement was going down, and everything was very exciting. The work has continued on the trail, and what a great time to be able to have that work being done for the city, because more and more and more pavement has gone down. And as we've had to go through shelter in place, people being sent home from work, working from home, that trail has probably helped many citizens in the city and surrounding areas maintain their sanity. I know it's helped me because early on in the pandemic, realizing day 2 or 3 when my 3 children were all in our house,
Right.
how much food they consume. And it's funny, but I it hit me like a ton of bricks. It was day 2, I think, and I thought, gosh, they are eating a lot of food. And I immediately thought of our community, and I thought
Right.
people are going to be suffering really soon. From trying to feed their children that are, and Clark, CCSD, came through and did a great job there. But I immediately assembled a task force, that Friday after everything kind of started to shut down. Stakeholders in this community, in the churches, local churches, and I assembled a group at the community center to talk about food insecurity and put a task force together to begin looking at how we're going to feed everybody, not only in Winterville, but in the surrounding areas. So we're surrounded by some of the poorer parts of our county. So we wanted to make sure that we were doing our part as a partner to the county and this community and the rural areas beyond us, to make sure that our young ones and those that were, and the elderly that needed food were going to be able to get it.
Right.
And also in conjunction with that, and I'm be very transparent with you, the sleepless nights
Right.
from the city budget and what that was going to look like, and how we were going to pay our city employees and how we were going to keep things running, due to the fact that 40% of our budget is made up of local option sales tax, and we
Right.
have no real revenue stream of our own as a small city. And with the university sending kids home, and that revenue stream kind of drying up a bit, I had a lot of sleepless nights. So it took a while for the new normal to be okay, because at some point you just got to say, all right, this is it. We got to figure out how to make this work.
Right.
And add to that, we had some issues with our little girl, and some medical issues that were incredibly serious during the middle of all that. So it was a high stress period. But I'm looking out on the square now, and the 2 beautiful deodar cedars that I look out of my office, the mayor's office here, and this city, and the things that were going on in the auditorium and the Firefly Trail were of comfort to us through all that too.
Right.
To me, not only as a public servant, seeing our community out and about, but also to our family, being able to spend time out on that trail and walking through the city, and there's something very comforting to Winterville. And through that period, it was very important to me to provide a sense of normalcy for our citizens. So we waited as long as we could, but then we had to pull the plug on the Marigold Festival. But what we did was we continued to plant the marigolds that citizens are used to
Right.
seeing year in and year out. As a festival board, we decided, let's go ahead and do that. It was a hard decision because it costs money to do that, but the city and the board partnered together, and I'm now looking at a city full of marigolds that the citizens have been able to enjoy, and the trees that we had planted for the trail. So we tried to throughout that story that I just told you, in the background, we were creating the sense of normalcy that citizens are used to, so that we could all kind of feel that and be comforted by that. And now fast forward to today, we still don't know what the new normal is.
Right.
Every day you do feel like a pilgrim in a new world. And
Right.
I think we're going to feel like that for a while. But we live in one of the greatest communities in the country, in not only Winterville, but in Athens, Georgia,
Right.
because of the music community, because of the university, because of everything that we have here. And times like this really shine a bright light on the things that this community will do for each other. So I guess back to the question you asked me, how am I doing? And I said, great. I'll answer it again and say, I don't know.
Yeah. Right.
But we're here, and we're going to be okay. And we're going to make it through whatever we face in the future. And we've learned a lot about ourselves. I've learned a lot more about this community and the greater community. And we'll move forward into whatever we encounter next with the pandemic.
Absolutely. So speaking of Porch Fest, I have a comment here from the head of Tweed, our Porch Fest presenting sponsor, Tweed Recording, award-winning preservationist himself now. But he said, well said, Mayor. Andrew, thank you so much for watching, and thanks for the encouragement. Mayor,
could I
please.
Andrew, say, Andrew, I look forward to the day when we can have your students back out into the auditorium to have their live recording class sessions in our Winterville auditorium. So miss you guys, and look forward to seeing your Tweed recording students soon.
Absolutely. Yeah, we got to spend some time with Andrew and David online on, I guess it was Tuesday night. You know, time has lost all meaning in the middle of a pandemic, but to celebrate their win for the Tweed recording won Best Adaptive Reuse for their studio, and he responded to your comment, Dodd. Me too, man. So absolutely. So. Dodd, I want to just go back to one thing you shared with us. Usually it's something I wait to ask a little later in the interview, but you've kind of touched on it. And to make it a bit easier to ask this question, I'll share a little. So you talked about sleepless nights, and one of the things we've really tried to capture with these interviews is, if I'm being nice, I can call it a moment of calibration. If I'm not being nice, I could say just like these quick moments of fear and despair or frustration, but anyone who is a leader, anyone who's having to lead an organization or an initiative or community, like you do, it's not just that you as a private citizen have to grapple with a pandemic, which is true too. You mentioned your daughter, or having to, the effects on your family, whether or not you're wearing, before we went on air, I know that you're wearing a gaiter right now. You've got a mask up, and so you've got your private care to be concerned about, but then there's a whole bunch of people looking to you, right? I mean, you have your city looking to you. That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of mental sanity to protect. How have you juggled that pressure? How have you protected your own sanity?
That's a great question. I think throughout this, we've all kind of had a chance to almost go back to a previous time when things were simpler. So when we were kind of when we were all sent home and sheltering in place, I was with my family. Cameron, my wife, who's an artist, works at home, and the kids. And I took kind of comfort, and that's where I was able to recalibrate day in and day out, and still am. every day in the comfort of my family and our home here in Winterville.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing was a sense of, um, you know, I'm not going to let this pandemic um, hurt this city, and I started thinking not about withdrawing and going to sleep and hopefully wake up and the thing's gone, right?
Right.
As a city leader, started to think about ways that, not like providing that sense of normalcy, of course, which is a daily, those are things we can do daily for citizens to kind of ease their concerns. But for me, it was thinking about, all right, how do we protect our city? How do I make this better for the next mayor or the next people that come, 10, 15, 20
Mm-hmm.
years from now? How do I strengthen the city so that when we go through this, another mayor isn't having sleepless nights like I'm having, or
Right.
worried about the different things. So we've started to think about those revenue ideas, and we've started to think about ways that we can fortify the city and protect it from the next pandemic, or even the next wave of this pandemic, or the next um, national issue that we have that affects all of us, that is just unavoidable. So it kind of, instead of shrinking, I thought about, all right, let's grow. Now's the time to really start thinking about how we're gonna grow, because we have all these wonderful things, we have all these wonderful buildings that you've talked about. How do we make those work for the city so that the next administration and the next administration and the next administration are okay when we have a situation like this? So that's kind of been the way I've handled it, and kind of just, you get punched in the stomach and you get up and
Right.
you get back on your feet, and then you figure out how to not get punched in the stomach again.
Right.
So that's basically what I'm doing, and that has given me, that kind of gives me comfort. Like I said, I
Yeah.
like to help people. My job is the public servant of the city of Winterville. So it's my duty to do that for the city, just as it was growing up in historic preservation.
Right.
I had no choice but to renovate. I have no choice but to protect and guard against this happening to others in the future. So that's kind of given me the strength to wake up every day and push on. And I keep going back to this community, all these wonderful people. You had Rashi on yesterday,
Right.
Mariah tomorrow,
Yeah.
I mean, all these beautiful human beings working on behalf of this community. You're not working alone. We have this big, beautiful net of people that can help us and that are helping us. So all of that works together to kind of give me the strength every day to go out and go, you know what, let's do something special throughout this difficult time.
That's a beautiful answer, Mayor. Thank you. So we still have about 20 minutes to talk, and there's a number of topics we're going to hit. Just one moment to our viewers, though, before we get to the rest of the topics that we're going to be talking about with Mayor Ferrelle. I am going to quickly thank our annual sponsors. Please don't tune away. There's a lot left for us to cover. So just one moment here. Just so everyone here can see the names and logos you see on screen here, these represent the businesses and the individuals, the families that support us as annual sponsors throughout the year. If you see a business here that you can support, please do so. If you're looking for great construction and looking at DSI, architects at ArcoLab, whether you need to pick up some great food from Heirloom or Epting, whatever the case, we hope that you'll support these businesses. They're supporting our 52-year-old mission as a 501c3 to celebrate and conserve community heritage in the Athens area, including oral history projects like this. So we hope that you will check that out. The mayor did a big favor for me, actually brought up the idea of who's on tomorrow. We want to emphasize that tomorrow, and so once again, this is hard to believe, April 13th, time stretched out way ahead of us and now it's gone. But, our first interview, April 13th, was with Broderick Flanagan. Mayor Ferrelle here is the second to last interview. And tomorrow is Commissioner Parker. If you're interested in going back and looking at some of these episodes with journalists, elected officials, and more, please go to the video section of our Facebook page and check that out. There's some really phenomenal, candid, and important interviews there. If you're looking for a quick and easy way to support Historic Athens, you can head over to historicathens.com and pick up one of our limited edition, locally printed and designed shirts celebrating Boulevard Historic District, Rock Springs Historic District, and buildings and architecture of Athens. When we finish today at 2 with the mayor, you can head over to our page for the Athens Welcome Center. The staff there is hard at work welcoming you to different aspects of Athens history. So at 2 o'clock, there'll be a live cast. Each day they're doing either a virtual site visit or a different workshop. And then one last note before we get back to our interview here, which is we're in the midst of celebration season, celebrating award-winning historic preservation projects like Tweed. Each night we are doing a deep dive with some of the award winners, and you can tune in live as we do that with host David Matheny. You can tune in tonight at 6 o'clock. We'll be interviewing the folks behind Square One Fish Company's renovation over in Normaltown. And then we're also going to have a really fascinating conversation with Ellen Walker and the subject of her book, It Is Well, The Life and Times of James Russell Smith, important African-American choir leader and community leader. So that'll be really fascinating, and we hope that you'll tune in. So thank you very much for that. All right, so Mayor, thanks again for allowing me to draw our audience's attention to a few other areas. Getting back to our discussion, so it would be one thing, Dodd, if things would just come at you one at a time, but that's never the case. You know, as mayor, you're addressing all kinds of things. One quick area I'm just curious about is, Winterville has been very proactive in recent years on looking back at its history, trying to decide which parts of this history to highlight, which parts of that history should be considered. And the whole country is doing that right now. The pause button that COVID hit allowed us to consider the role of equity, discrimination, prejudice, in public administration in our everyday lives. Many of our guests on this program, from City Manager Blaine Williams to the elected officials we've had, have talked about how one has served as kind of a catalyst for another. I'm wondering whether there's been time for that kind of consideration out in Winterville, or I know there's so much going on, but how are you feeling out there with all this change and all the dramatic conversations that are happening around our country right now? Oh, I'm sorry. 1 second. Sorry, 1 second. Please start again. Sorry about that.
Sure. They're happening here. These discussions are happening here, and it's something that, to be honest with you, I tried to get ahead of early on, and I think you mentioned some of the murals that we have in the city.
Right.
Those murals there's two, and I can see both of them from my office. Mm-hmm. Those might be my favorite things that I end up doing while in office, because our public school children, they're very intentional murals. Our public school children are responsible for the artwork that is in the murals. And my wife assembled their artwork from Winterville Elementary into a cohesive mural, outlined their artwork, and the community came out and filled in the paint. And what those murals represent is a very diverse city, mm-hmm. a very inclusive city. And those murals, as pieces of art, were done to empower. It was my hope for the children and their families to be empowered, to be represented on the side of a city building that the city council voted to allow this piece of artwork to inhabit for many, many, many years to come. But they are also done to hopefully, as you said, in public administration, to pull that diversity into my role in city council and participating more in the functions of the government, of the governing of the city of Winterville, and it's working. So we started doing that early. Obviously, the time we're in is incredibly turbulent, But I feel like, and by no means, you know, is everything perfect out here, but we started those conversations a long time ago as a city.
Yeah.
I started having those conversations a long time ago, and we have the conversations with our police department and our public safety officers, and I've had those difficult conversations in the last 2 or 3 weeks, but we're all on board with a community policing department that understands and understands the situation we're in. Um, so, I hope that answered. I
No,
hope,
it does. And I want to say that, there's one thing you said near the beginning of your answer that was really fascinating was, so we're seeing a lot of more murals, inclusive murals around the country. Famously, we're seeing a lot of Black Lives Matter murals on streets and other ways. And sometimes mural projects can be decried as symbolic only. What I loved about your answer was that you're saying that process of producing those murals, and they are beautiful. I mean, I've had the chance to go look at them, and they're really incredible. Those murals, you're saying it wasn't just about creating this one piece, saying have a good day and going home. It was about bringing people into the process, making sure that they knew that they were decision makers too, and inviting them to have a seat at the table in the decision making process. Is that right?
Absolutely, that's absolutely right, and that was the intent, and it's bearing out in the city today. And I'm proud. I'm proud of that. Obviously, there's work to do every day there. I mean, there's conversations to have all day long, every day, right now. But those pieces are exactly what you described, and exactly what the intent behind them was: the empowerment and the
Right.
process, and the pulling out of of the various peoples within our city, and those families to feel like they are part of this process and they need to be a part of this process.
Mhm.
So it's incredibly important, and that's why I said that those might be my two proudest moments. I mean, we're going to accomplish a lot out here in the city, but those two murals might just be the two processes that I look back on that were the most empowering for our city, and to represent the inclusivity and the diversity, and have them be a part of the governing of their city.
Thank you. Yeah, that's fantastic. So I want to transition to our last three questions. They are questions we've asked each guest. Before we do, while I have you on the line, because as I said, I'm out running these trails all the time. I do need to just cycle back to Firefly because you can probably answer this for me. So I've been thrilled with the fact that I can walk out my door on Cleveland Avenue near Barber Street over by the Jittery Joe's Roaster, and I can jog down to MLK. I can hop on the Greenway. I can go up to the Sandy Creek Nature Center. I can turn back around, follow the trail all the way to Dudley Park behind Mama's Boy, and now pick up this connector that will connect to the Firefly fully. And if I wanted to, as I'm building my mileage up, I can get all the way out to Winterville. Right now at the Quick Trip connector, it's almost connected but not quite, right? When is it anticipated that that Firefly Trail will be completed, that we'll be able to go from one end to the other?
So, and you're talking about the connection from the Quick Trip to the city?
That's right.
Yeah. Well, so the grand plan, or something that I was
Yeah.
certainly in favor of years ago, was for Winterville to be a bookend to what had already been built out
Yep.
from the university and to the Quick Trip. Um, and so that's happened, right? And to be honest, I mean, it's happened pretty quick.
Yeah.
I know some people are going to hear that and go, "What? We worked on that for 20 years." But in my time, um, in my role, it's happened pretty quick. And I do know, in talking with Mayor Gertz and Blaine, the intention is to connect sooner than later. A lot of that the deal hinges on land acquisition,
Yep.
but I'm going to say, and I was thinking about this today this morning when I was jogging. I think a good guesstimate
Yeah,
might be 3 years
that's
connected.
fantastic. Yeah.
3 years connected, give or take, and that's going to be incredible, especially for the city, obviously. And just what you mentioned, the new subdivisions that are going in, where where you can walk out in your backyard and see the Milky Way.
Yeah.
And hop on a bike and ride 6-8 miles to work in Athens if you want to, and then ride to Winterville and get your exercise done during your commute. So hopefully, 3 years, and then maybe beyond out to Greensboro, not too long after that.
Unbelievable. I don't think you'll be worrying about sales tax dollars anymore at that point, when you have that many folks that can live in Winterville and get the Winterville experience and the Athens experience at the same time.
Sure.
So Mayor, let's direct to the last 3 questions, and then if we have time left over, we'll touch on anything else.
Okay.
The first question is this: we've asked each of our guests to imagine a world where this is over. So if you woke up tomorrow and all of your favorite businesses were open, no more need for curbside, you could go right in. Let's say that every park was open, every movie theater, everything. If you had the day off on a day like that, where would you go? What do you miss most right now?
Gosh, Tommy, I would answer this differently every day that you ask me for the next 100 days. But right now, I would love to walk through Pittard Park during the Marigold Festival. That would be a beautiful day. Or sit in the auditorium and hear a band play to a full house in the Winterville Auditorium with the community gathered back together. Anything. Go to the 40 Watt, see a rock band,
Yeah.
Go back downtown and just experience normalcy again, and not feel like like a North and South Pole. When you walk by somebody, you just kind of start to bounce off and bounce around. I think I'm gonna just stick with the Marigold Festival on a beautiful.
Yeah, I don't think you can beat that. Yeah.
Yeah, say 75 degrees. Somebody playing on stage, and all the artists and vendors out with their tents up, and a community full of people enjoying it. I think that'd be a great day.
Great day indeed. So our second to last question here is, when this is over, when this pandemic is over, it's very likely we'll not only be climbing out of that, we'll likely be also climbing out of a recession of sorts, or maybe a full-fledged recession. And after a recession, a lot of times you have pent-up development pressure. We're not anti-development or building. That's, I think, a bad misconception about preservation that we have ourselves to blame for. But what we don't want to have happen is overnight wake up and have a bunch of endangered historic places. So as we're preparing to be ready for that, we've been asking each of the community leaders like yourself we've had on the program to share some of their favorite historic places that they hope, and this is how I usually phrase it, Dodd, is, if somebody's watching your interview 50 years from now at the UGA library, and they go outside after watching that interview, what are the historic places in Athens and in Winterville that you hope our community has continued to preserve so that future person can still enjoy them? Anything come to mind?
Well, obviously the auditorium, and we're already working there, but we've got a lot of work left to do. We're by no means finished, and you talk about the recession and the people that have been affected by that. Some of the grant dollars that we had been able to use for the last few years to minimize the impact on our own city funds, they may or may not be there over the next couple of years. So, I think the auditorium and the community center next door, the upstairs, the community center, and really some of the buildings that we have here in the city, with the old blacksmith shop that's still sitting in disrepair, that we need to renovate for future use for generations. Like you're saying, 50 years from now, that could be a real special spot along the Firefly Trail. And then a lot of the houses that had fallen into disrepair along Main Street that are coming back there are a couple left that need to be turned. So those, to be very specific, those are the buildings that I'm hoping are protected, renovated, because the auditorium will serve. And when you say 100 years, 50 years, like you've said in this interview,
Right.
We're building that building for when I talk to contractors, when I talk to people that are helping me with the vision of that property, I tell them I want to build this for the next 100 years. I want to build this, fortify this for the next 100 years. So it can serve not only audiences in rural parts of the state that Atlanta and Athens don't really reach out into, but also those young artists and creative people that need a spot, that need a spot for their craft, to hone their craft. So I'm gonna say the auditorium is my number one. Can I do that?
I think you absolutely can do that. How could I stop you? But let's see here, and I don't want to neglect our last comments that are coming in here, so I want to share them. Jeremy Field says, "My father, brother, and I walked from our house in 5 Points out to Crawford on the old rail line back in the '80s. Never really knew why until the rails to trail deal started happening. I guess we can claim we were the first." And he added, and love what's going on in Winterville. Keep it up, Mayor. So, Jeremy, you're the first. Thankfully, we have Dodd to make sure you're not the last.
Can I say something to
please
that?
do. Yeah. Go for it.
Yeah, and thank you, Jeremy. And I woke up to a nice message this morning. The messages like that from the community have been, a lot of community members have said how much they love the trail and what's going on. So that's been great to hear, especially during this time. You always like to hear things like that, but it's great to hear that the work that we're doing is providing a sense of normalcy. And, we love what's going on. And, so that's great to hear. Thank you, Jeremy. And thank you to everybody that has given those attaboys and thumbs ups to what is going on out in the city. I can tell you that it means more every day during this current situation than you would ever imagine. Your kind words. So I appreciate them.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thank you. So, Mayor, let's close with our last question. So I asked you to consider a hypothetical college student 50 years from now. I'm going to ask that we push 50 years past that. In the early days of COVID, one of the tasks that our organization was given was to help produce a segment for the local NPR affiliate about how Athens had grappled with the 1918 flu and what lessons we should take from that now. It was a really great experience, partially because it enabled us to look back 100 years ago and say, okay, how did we handle this last one? There's every chance that future generations are going to want to know how we, including you, handled this now. So if somebody was looking at this interview 100 years from now, Mayor, what would you want them to know about this moment in June 2020?
Whew. I would want them to know that we as a people pulled together. And the good people of this world made sure that the people that did not have had and have. And that we realized, and I believe this, I read a lot of mindfulness books, Eckhart Tolle, and I'm reading a biography of Walt Whitman now, which is kind of good timing because from an agrarian society to a capitalistic society. And I think that, one thing I would want them to know personally is that we are a people. We are not an economy. We are human beings who were hit with something unexpected that we were unprepared for, that we are dealing with. and we are getting through, and it's changing us, and it's going to continue to change us because we're not done with it yet. But we are hopefully, and I believe, understanding that we have to pull together to do things like this. We cannot do them alone. We have to pull together for the reasons I mentioned, for others, for ourselves, for our families, and for our cities and counties and state, country. But we have to realize that we are a people first and not an economy. And we have to be mindful of others. And I think if we do that, we do the important things every day to make sure that we're all okay. Because when something like this happens to you and punches you in the stomach,
yeah,
you are going to have to get up, and you're going to have to do something. And if you can do that, not only for yourself, but for others, we're all better off for that. So I don't know if that's a concise answer, but it's my answer. It's throughout this process, it's just been kind of silly, the conversations that you hear. And
right.
I obviously we're not naive. We have to have an economy, and we have to keep moving, but we also have to understand what's important, and when you pull away and you're in your yard or you're out and about, and you're a musician. We've been through hard times. I've experienced hard times where we didn't have a whole lot. And it just makes you recognize and appreciate what you do have, but also understand that if you didn't have it, you would still have each other.
Right.
And you would have to figure out how to keep each other safe and strong. And sometimes you have to do that in different ways, so.
No, that's Mayor. Thank you for that perspective. The idea that we are a community with an economy and not the other way around is, I think, very important. So thank you.
Yep.
To everyone who tuned in today, tomorrow will be, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's our final episode. We will be back at 1 o'clock with Athens Clarke County Commissioner Mariah Parker. We can't thank Mayor Ferrelle enough, not only for coming on the program, but for the work you're doing out there. Mayor, you and I are going to hop off line together here in just a moment. But I do want to, again, say thank you for making time in your busy schedule to talk to us today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Everyone out there, including the mayor, please stay safe, stay healthy. We'll be back tomorrow at 1. We hope to see you then. That is a very swaggy mask. Looks great. Fantastic. I do have to say for our viewers here, is that a superhero's mask? Is that what I see going?
This is a Superman mask that a local citizen, wonderful human being, and so many wonderful human beings have been making masks, and my little girl and wife made a bunch for the hospitals, but this was made by a local citizen who's made some for our police and fire department, and yes, this is Superman.
Superman. All right. Well, we're going to leave off with Superman. All right. The last son of Krypton himself. All right. So Krypton himself. All right. Mayor, thank you very much. Everybody out there, stay safe, stay healthy. We'll be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Thanks a lot. Bye.